Hi, and welcome to Introvertebrates. In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the strangest things I've ever experienced as a tarantula keeper. It was all about this tarantula who lives in here. And here is Siuzi, my Theraphosa apophysis. And what happened is about 6 months ago, I checked on her and she was just covered in mold or some sort of fungi. Just her entire dorsal part was just white with this kind of almost like a powdery substance, which I suspect to be mold. Hugely concerning. And if you know anything about tarantulas and tarantula keeping, this is pretty much your worst nightmare. So this video, I'm going to talk about what I did to mend that situation, how I did that, what I think caused it, and how I can prevent this from happening in the future. And here you have Siuzi. She is my Theraphosa apophysis, also known as the pink-footed Goliath bird eater. And Siuzi, she is by far my largest spider. I don't know exactly how large, but I would say her body length is about 6-7 centimeters. I'll put up the inches on the screen here so you'll know what that is if you don't know the metric system. Obviously, like any tarantula will keep growing throughout their life, but by far my largest spider, and also one of the spiders I've kept the longest. If you've seen some previous videos, I have talked about how I've been keeping tarantulas for a very long time, but I had a hiatus for maybe about 5-6 years, and Siuzi was one of the first spiders I got when I got back into the hobby. And if you know anything about the Theraphosa apophysis or any other Theraphosa, the blondie or the sturmy, they require quite the humid environment. They are considered fairly difficult, not a beginner species. And one of those reasons is because they're kind of finicky about how you keep them. So yeah, as I said, they like their humidity be high, very high humidity, so you have to mist very frequently. For Siuzi, I do have a misting system that is on a timer, so that keeps the vivarium regularly misted. And I also keep a little computer fan, which will help with the airflow. And I guess for a tarantula that needs this kind of high humidity, airflow is something that you really have to be on top of, because that is one of the biggest problems, and also one of the biggest reasons why tarantulas living in humid environments end up having mold in the vivarium. So all of this started pretty much a year ago. Siuzi was in Premolt, and being such a large tarantula, she will be in Premolt for quite a while. She was in Premolt for at least 6 months, maybe longer. I'm not sure exactly, but I think about 6 months before she actually molted. So when a tarantula, and especially a large one like Siuzi, is in Premolt, you really have to make sure that the humidity stays high. This is to prevent anything wrong happening during a molt, because they can easily get caught in their molt or just not molt well. Like, it could be many things that could happen. They can lose legs, can lose the whole leg, parts of a leg. Many things can happen if the humidity is not high enough. Worst case scenario, they get completely stuck and can't get out of it and they die. So that's why you have to really stay on top of the humidity, especially during molt. That's for any tarantula. If one of these who live in a humid environment, it's extra important. And I actually do have some experience when it comes to why this is so significant, because Siuzi herself actually lost her tarsus, so the last end of her leg, basically, like if you look at your fingers, like this last part where your nail is, she lost that part. Not sure exactly what happened, but after a molt, it was gone. And as you can see in the footage, she was walking about perfectly fine without it. And also, as you might know, spiders do regenerate their joints as they grow. So she had a couple of molts, and now her leg looks fine again. So it's kind of cool. But this just shows the significance of high humidity. She was in a very high humid environment when she molted. Still something went wrong. Luckily, it was just the tarsus. Could have been the whole leg, so I was happy it wasn't worse. Anyway, in preparation for Siuzi's molt, I did reduce the airflow just a little bit. Generally, I'll keep the fan on for about 12 hours a day, same with the light. So when the light's on, the fan is also on. So that generates heat from the light and also the airflow. So during the day, it tends to be a little bit less humidity in her vivarium and a little bit higher at night. So that's on purpose that I do it like that. And again, I also have a misting system. So a couple of times a day, I think 3 times a day, there's water getting sprayed into the vivarium. So there's always a pretty high humidity level in her vivarium. And as you can see here, Siuzi did eventually molt. As I said, she was in pre-molt for at least 6 months. But she molted, and I actually got some footage of her molting, some time-lapse images, so that was nice. And after the molt, she looked great. I mean, I think everything went fine. I saw that tarsus on that leg was pretty much all the way back. Looks brand new, and everything was honky-dory. All right, so to summarize, Siuzi has molted successfully. Everything is all good. Before that, I had lowered the fan frequency, so the fan wasn't on as much as it usually is. But she molted, everything's all good. She started to act like normal again. And then all of a sudden, one day, I just see Siuzi and she is covered in this white stuff. I wasn't sure, and when I first saw her, I wasn't sure what it was. She was kind of hidden, and she likes to travel. Like, she has a burrow right here, and she also has a burrow right there. So she goes back and forth, and generally this side is more humid. So the misting system is up there, comes down here. So this is more humid. And there used to be a lot more plants here, but I had to remove those, and I'll get to that. But she, most of the time, she's right here. She's right there. But as I said, she does move back and forth, and I do keep it like that. I try to keep it a little more dry on this side and a little more humid on this side, just so she can kind of choose whether or not she wants higher or lower humidity. And also, Theraphosa are known to kind of wander a bit. They don't necessarily stay in the same place all the time like a lot of other tarantulas would do. Either way, Siuzi was acting like normal, and then boom, covered in mold. What the hell? What happened? This is your worst nightmare as a tarantula keeper. I've never had it happen. I've seen mold in vivariums. That's happened before. I've seen that. Been managed. I mean, her vivarium is bioactive. There's isopods, there's springtails, and I still didn't see any mold in here. It's just Siuzi. She's covered, nothing else. So yeah, strange. What the hell is going on? Instead of panicking, I mean, I kind of panicked, but I tried to stay rational. Okay, what can I do now? What can I do to help Siuzi? The good thing is, it was her dorsal side. Her top side was covered in mold. I managed to get the look underneath her, so her book lungs, they were fine. There's nothing along her book lungs, because that's something I've read about, that they can be covered with mold or mites or something, and they basically suffocate. But all of the mold seems to be on top of her. So that's good. That's the only positive thing at this point. But it's still concerning, because mold, it will grow, it will migrate over her whole body. I mean, it covered most of her prosoma and her abdomen, and it was also a little bit on her legs. So I was terrified that this would spread even further. So first things first, you need to dry it out, basically. That's the main thing people say. Okay, you have to dry out. You have to kill the mold with dryness. All this mold is on Siuzi. So I can't remove Siuzi, put her in a separate box, and dry out the vivarium. I need to dry out her, but then again, she's a spider that requires high humidity. So you have kind of an issue right there. And yeah, that was a tough one. So the first thing I actually did was to remove a bunch of plants. So this area was covered in plants. All this, I took this out too. This has been growing back later. And all of this started, I think, in June of last year, 2025. But yeah, I removed all the plants here just to make sure I could see better. I took out the misting system, or I disconnected the misting system. I figured, okay, I'm gonna do all manual misting. No more misting system. I wanna make sure I know exactly how much water is in this vivarium. I also had the fan back on its regular schedule, so about 12 hours a day. I did increase the frequency a little bit, but again, I need to dry it out, but I don't want to dry it out too much. And I still have to keep it humid, but again, by doing the manual misting, I can mist this side, made sure this side was always humid. Her water dish is over here. So of course you have to make sure there's water in the water dish, but special concern during this time. This side stayed pretty dry. Never misted this side, only misted that side. And as I said, she has a burrow there, she has a burrow there. So she has possibilities of hiding, feeling safe in both places. So that's the first thing I did. It was just removing the plants and doing that. The reason I removed the plants is that they might increase the humidity quite a bit, and it's harder to control exactly how much humidity is in the vivarium. So yeah, that's basically the thing I did, and I really didn't know anything else. I couldn't find too much information on mold growing on actual spiders. Tons of information about mold growing in the vivarium, and as I said, I've dealt with that before. But again, this is Siuzi being covered. I can't do that, so that's where I had to be creative. That's one of the reasons why I'm making this video, is kind of to help out other people. If this ever happens to you, maybe you can watch this video and maybe, hopefully, I can help you out a little bit. Because this did work, luckily. I'm so happy. I was so concerned. I care so much about these spiders. You have no idea. It's kind of ridiculous, but I love them so much. I really do. And seeing a spider like that, she acted fine. That was very nice to see. She fed, nothing wrong there. Everything's all good. But just seeing there, all that mold on her was just heartbreaking. And yeah, it really did break my heart. I was so concerned for her for such a long time. It's been over 6 months since this started. And around this time, she actually started looking perfectly fine. I don't really see any mold on her anymore. But yeah, enough ranting. She kind of fluctuated. The mold came back strong. As I said, I did manual misting. I did that for a long time, and that's mainly just because I can make sure exactly. So maybe at some points I gave her a little too much. Other times maybe I misted the perfect amount, but I always made sure it was humid, but not too humid. So the mold would come and it would recede and then come back a little bit, recede, until I found that balance. And really then slowly but surely, it started going away. And I knew this would be a long-term project. And something I actually noticed while editing this video was the first sign of mold. And the first sign of mold, which you can see here in the footage, was actually on that tarsus that she was regenerating. And again, didn't notice this until I edited this specific video. Never saw it before, never noticed when I filmed it. I see it now, so maybe that's the start of it. Who knows? And I promised to give you guys my theories about why this happened. And you know, mold is a type of fungi, and it grows under certain conditions, generally high humidity conditions. Why it's growing just on Siuzi and nowhere else, not sure. But my theory is maybe when there was some mold spores on the ground. When she was molting, laying on the ground, maybe they kind of got attached to her body, and then the conditions were just right, and boom, huge outbreak. I don't know, maybe. I would love to hear what you guys think. If you guys have any theories about it, I would love to hear it. And if anyone has ever experienced this themselves, I'd love to hear from you. Because again, I could not find much information about this. So I'm very, very curious to hear other people's experience with this kind of issue. Hopefully this will never ever happen to your spider, but if it does, I really hope this video can be helpful. And if this does happen or anything else, feel free to reach out. I'll try to help you out as best as I can. And yeah, if you guys have any tips on how to prevent this from happening in the future for me or other keepers, just let me know. I'd love to share that knowledge and This is something we work on together. We get better together in keeping these amazing creatures the best way possible. So don't be hesitant to share with me. If you want to see some other spider and invertebrate stuff, I have a Instagram channel. And of course, there's going to be more spider updates and some turtle and other things on this channel. So feel free to watch some of my more videos, some of my other videos. And yeah, I just appreciate you watching either way. So thanks so much for that. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.